Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn how Uber and Mad Canada are reducing impaired driving at uber.com/home soon.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw. Thank you for joining us on the weekly program. Thank you to those of us who are joining us on the daily audio podcast, Political Capital Daily as well. Appreciate it. You'll see the pod squad here with me today, Jillian Oliver, Jeff Ferrier, and Angelo Isidorou, all here, and they all make appearances on Political Capital Daily too, so add that to your podcast feed. We got a lot to talk about here. It's nonetheless a busy week in BC politics. I want to start with a very serious story, and we're going to go around a couple times on this to talk a little bit about it and the implications. Peace River North Independent MLA Jordan Kealy charged with sexual assault this week. Special prosecutor notification after an RCMP investigation that began in February relating to allegations that date back to before the 2024 provincial election. Kealy has said that he is innocent and he intends to remain in his job and continue to do his work. Let us begin there and go around. Everyone is talking about what should happen in a situation like this. There's various opinions about Jordan Kealy and what he should do and what other people should do. Let's just go around and try to detangle that a little bit. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, the first thing that should happen is Jordan Kealy should step down as MLA. If he's exonerated or if he's convicted, his time and attention are not going to be on his constituents. They're going to be on these charges, so he should step aside. There should be a by-election, and someone who can focus on representing the people of Peace River North should be elected.
But he is innocent until proven guilty. That's the sort of counterpoint that keeps coming up.
Well, that's true. But if you are elected to be a full-time representative of your constituents and you are spending half of your time dealing with criminal charges, it doesn't matter if you're exonerated or if you're convicted. It matters that you're taking your eye off of the ball of what your constituents have put you in office to do, which is represent them. So I think he should step aside, clear these up. If he's innocent, next election, come on back. But if not, they'll have someone new in there who can represent them properly.
Jillian, that is kind of the debate in a nutshell, right? You know, can an MLA under a serious criminal cloud, even though they're presumed innocent until proven guilty, do their job effectively? What do you think of that?
I think that the standard for holding a position of public trust should be really high. And, you know, when you're an MLA, you're in a position of having to advocate for your constituents. People who are in all kinds of different types of vulnerable situations need to be able to come to you and to feel safe with you and to trust you totally to help them with whatever very difficult problems they're dealing in their lives. MLAs deal with child welfare cases. They deal with all kinds of things. So I think that Jeff's right, that MLA Kealy should step down so that his constituents can continue to be able to access a trustworthy advocate to help them with their issues that they're dealing with.
Angelo, what do you think on all this?
I think it's important to really define the role of an MLA. We all see MLAs in the House debating, introducing bills, but there's an operational role to an MLA in their constituency. As Jillian said, if you're a parent fighting for custody over your child, if you are an elderly constituent trying to get access to a doctor, like many vulnerable constituents go to their MLA. And what we're seeing happen with Mr. Kealy is really an inaccessibility in his operational role due to these charges. So it's very difficult, and it's going to be a challenge for him to frankly do his job while he has these charges pending. Absolutely, a pillar of Western society and our justice system is you're innocent until proven guilty. But if this was a police officer, if this was a paramedic, a firefighter, they would be asked to step down, right? It's just there are certain roles in society that require a high degree of trust in their operational capacity. So it could well be the case that he is innocent. It could well be the case that he's guilty. We don't know. But what we do know is that it's going to be exceedingly difficult and a challenge for him to fulfill the role of an MLA.
So this is the second sitting MLA right now in the legislature to be charged with a serious crime. Richmond MLA Han Chan is charged with assault and assault by choking in a alleged domestic violence case. And I guess the question sort of becomes, and maybe we can go around on this, should there be like a rule to sort of force an action here? And I'll just go back to 2022. The NDP government passed the municipal changes that say if you're charged with an indictable offense in a serious offense in a municipal council, you have to take a leave of absence paid. And if you're convicted of that offense, you have to be disqualified from office. And I wonder if that's a threshold the legislature should adopt. If your local mayor has to take a leave for assault or a sexual assault and then be disqualified, would that help us with this discussion? Or are we destined to be stuck in this cycle? Or is there any way out of this, Jeff, do you think?
I think that what should force candidates or MLAs out of their position is their own sense of duty to the province. We call them honorable members for a reason. It's because we put our trust into them, that we believe that they will, whether they're on one side of the aisle or the other, they'll do their best to speak up for their constituents. And so if you have to legislate that, and even just if you legislate someone taking a leave, you still have the issue of who's representing the constituents, who's doing that operational work that Angelo talks about. So I think the onus shouldn't be on legislation. It should be on members. They're obvious situation. It should be obvious in situations like this that someone should step down, not try to hold on because it's frankly the right thing to do.
What do you think of legislation, Jillian? And then also, like, in the absence of that, you have Kealy supporters out saying this is David Eby, David Eby's justice system out to smear Jordan Kealy, and isn't the timing convenient with the new Conservative leader? So you have this kind of like defense that begins to form around an MLA's unwillingness to go, and then you have the NDP weaponizing it a little bit, showing pictures of Kealy and Kerry-Lynne Findlay and saying, oh, what did she know? And then it's just like drags us down. Would legislation help, or as Jeff points out, is that really just an MLA's job to have judgment here?
I think that, it certainly used to be the case that either pressure from caucus and political pressure from the public and optics would force people to step down in situations like that. But things have shifted so much in the last few years because we've seen politicians hold on in kind of unthinkable circumstances. I think that having a rule where there cannot be political interference actually makes sense in that context, because it's the same rule. It's for everyone, regardless of party, whether they're in government or opposition, or if they're an independent like Kealy. It makes sense to me because then that sort of limits the opportunity for conspiracy theories and accusations of political interference. To be clear, a special prosecutor is totally independent, and the threshold for bringing charges in a case like this is really high. So I would say those accusations are unfounded from all sides. But yeah, I think having a clear rule that applies to everyone makes sense, given that we now have multiple precedents for it.
Angelo, any way we can get around the politicization of this and the sort of weaponization of it with a rule, or is that a bad idea, do you think?
I don't think we can get around it. There's always going to be a portion of the population that is going to say this is the establishment or the system coming after, our people. Like, this is the political era we live in, unfortunately. And we've inherited a lot of it from the United States. I think liberty-minded British Columbians would be concerned about, is the judiciary going to be weaponized against people? I think if you create a rule, it would actually probably galvanize that conspiracy theory even more. And then taxpayer-minded British Columbians would say, hey, this guy is being charged, or this girl is being charged, and they're going to go on a paid leave. That doesn't seem fair. Mind you, right now, they're just getting paid anyhow and going to work. So there's not really a great option. And I do think that we're sort of in uncharted territory. I don't know. One of you probably has better historical context for BC, but I can't think of another time when you had multiple MLAs at once being charged with some pretty serious crimes and what the outcome of that would be. So we're also in recall season. So, I think that could play a role as well.
Yeah. Okay, good discussion. Interesting kind of ways to look at this and if there's solutions to it and what happens to the office and the integrity of the office and also the constituents for people involved. So I appreciate that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the first week of new BC Conservative leader Kerry-Lynne Findlay. Well, welcome back. BC Conservative leader Kerry-Lynne Findlay with her first week in office this week. We're going to go around, talk a bit about that. She has a slogan and branding out, faith, family, and freedom. I think it's family, faith, and freedom. She did some interviews where she sparred with some reporters, and that became sort of an online thing, and then also made some comments of all things, Alberta separatism as well. But at the same time, a new Leger poll out showing the BC Conservatives in a lead of 45% to 41% for the NDP, taken in the days after Kerry-Lynne Findlay was elected. So there's a lot there to digest, Angelo. Let's start with you on this. Her first week as leader, the way it's landed, and then this poll. How do we put all of this together, do you think?
Well, I would start with the poll. I mean, the poll does have her as leader in it. They polled it very recently, and we can see what is effectively the best result the party has ever had from Leger, that typically is not so favorable to Conservatives. In fact, if you were to pull that out into ridings, it would be a majority government. I think she spent the week consolidating the base and consolidating caucus. She's spending most of her time meeting one-on-one with caucus members. And as you said, doing profile pieces, getting out in the media. She's attending a dinner with Premier Smith in Alberta. I think she's really, really putting the work in, and the week's turned into a bit of a blur. Saturday feels like 1,000 years ago, so I think she's hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, what do you think of the first week, but then also sort of the questions we all have? Angelo sort of touched on it there about trying to unify the party, put it together, meet people, that post-leadership race activity of someone who's trying to get their feet under them, but in our modern, rapid-moving political environment.
Yeah, it's supposed to be your political honeymoon, your first week as leader, but Kerry-Lynne Findlay hasn't even made it to the airport. Let's consider her week in reverse order of bad. Picking fights with almost every reporter and every network in British Columbia and some across Canada. After railing against Eastern elites when she found she was in difficulty, she called on noted Westerners Peter MacKay and Lisa Raitt to come to her assistance. I see she's taking on friendly fire from key Caroline Elliott supporters, so clearly that work on uniting the party is not yet done. She does an interview with the National Post where she talks about how she'd work with an independent Alberta that's so complementary to that independence movement that the separatist leader calls it helpful. And we just talked about the most damaging part of her week is one of her biggest backers, Jordan Kealy, 60% support in Peace River North during the leadership is charged criminally. So I'd call it a real tough first week. She's got encouraging news with that poll, but everything's at risk unless you can turn the ship around and get it on an even keel.
Jillian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the poll, it was taken the 2 days immediately following the election. I think a lot of people, the general public, weren't paying super close attention to the leadership race because there's just so much going on right now. And, they were in an internal party election. You're kind of talking about issues that might be a little bit different from what's top of mind for the general public. So I think people are just kind of tuning into Kerry-Lynne Findlay now. And I would say that the headlines weren't great for her in terms of the eyes of the general public. The biggest thing that stuck out for me is the Alberta separatism and just the extent to which Findlay sounds like Premier Smith. I think that is going to be really off-putting for a lot of people as we head into this Alberta referendum. And there's sort of this dichotomy in the conversation that's going to be, are you with Canada? Are you with Alberta? I think she needs to get grounded in the way that most British Columbians are thinking about that conversation. And I don't think that it is in Alberta's been treated unfairly in Canada. I think that most British Columbians remember when BC didn't want a pipeline and the federal government pushed it through and we paid $34 billion for it as taxpayers. I think that, she needs to shift gears quite quickly from talking to her base to talking to the wider public in BC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and usually you shift those gears after you, as Angelo put it, consolidate your base, but it doesn't quite feel like maybe that has happened yet. So we're waiting to see a lot with Miss Findlay and where that goes. The numbers are, I guess, encouraging. Sorry, Angelo, you wanted to jump in there?
Oh, I'm going to bring it back to earth here. I mean, look, the consolidation is important. People chattering online is always going to happen. It's a bit of a contrast to certainly the BC NDP leadership races where they just disqualify everyone running against their chosen candidate.
Who
And it's
cheat? Who cheat? Yeah, we disqualify people who cheat.
well, it is a coronation, let's be honest. And then I think in terms of the separatism talk, I mean, if you read the piece from the National Post, she was asked about a hypothetical scenario in which Alberta becomes its own country. Would you embargo Alberta or do you do business with it, right? I mean, Kerry-Lynne Findlay is Canadian born and bred. She believes in a unified Canada. I think Premier Smith also believes in a unified Canada. They're not separatists. And I think it's important we be clear about that.
Could you imagine if it was the CBC that asked that question to her? Holy Yakimo, there'd be the National Post laid out the question, makes it a lot less likely that it was some sort of trap it was just a question and an answer. And we'll see I think the real test will be if she's asked it again, does she articulate a more comprehensive answer to Jillian's point that matches the public sentiment, or is she going to try and thread this sort of needle of whatnot? Your first week in a question like that, maybe you just duff it. And
yeah, you don't answer hypotheticals. That's media training 101. And I think the right answer for the next time is, I love Canada, and I'm going to do everything in my power to show Alberta that British Columbians value them as friends in Canada.
Or just read Pierre Poilievre's, who has pledged to go out and support, the remaining. You can just read it, literally his lines, if for lack of creating new ones, if that's what she wants to do. Okay, good. Let's just take a break there. When we come back, the drama unfolding in the Surrey Police Department and the BC government's responsibilities on that, coming up after the break. Welcome back. Major turmoil at the Surrey Police Department this week. Chief Norm Lipinski abruptly fired by the board. Then the board chair announced he was quitting because he wasn't at that meeting and wasn't informed. And another board chair quits. The mayor comes out and says, I don't know what's going on. Well, people point fingers at her for being behind this. What a mess. And Premier David Eby out saying, the government doesn't have anything to do here. This is the local municipalities' responsibility. After all the discussions we've had about Surrey policing over the years, because the BC government forced this through for 3 years of drama, now what? Is there something that has to happen here? Or is this entirely on Surrey, or where do we go in a mess like this, Jillian? How do we get our heads around this?
Well, first thing I would say is it would be great if we had stronger FOI legislation that could help us get to the bottom of what the heck is going on here, because something obviously is. We have drips and clues of information. Lipinski says he was fired without cause. We know that after she won her election, Mayor Brendelloch said that he was going to lose his job. She was very public and clear about that. We also know that she cut the police budget and has kind of been starving it. It certainly seems like she wants it to fail, kind of based on the history here, but we don't really know what happened. Now we have 2 board members that have resigned over this, and nobody's really saying what actually happened and what the reason was, other than they wanted to go in another direction. The province now all of a sudden says it doesn't want anything to do with this, which just seems like obviously there's something that afoot that has transpired. But it seems like a big mess, and it's hard to see how this doesn't end up slowing the transition and creating more trouble when Surrey really needs its police force to be working on the very important cases that are happening out there.
Mm-hmm. And it's still transitioning. It's got an extortion crisis. It's got a gang crisis in Surrey. The crime rate is up more than 30%. I mean, there's lots going on in Surrey. Angelo, is it plausible for the BC government to just be like, this is a local issue at this point after, all of the things that it has done to push this through, or what has to happen here, do you think?
No, the BC government is liable for a lot of this, right? Their fingerprints are all over it. Let's go and do a history lesson. This was a controversial police force. The former mayor wanted it. The new mayor wanted to keep the RCMP. There was talks of a referendum, and ultimately the provincial government stepped in and said, no, this is what we're doing. That this board is established, the police service is established, you have the chief of police. And the police are really, we talked about this in the Daily Show, one of the few institutions that taxpayers and British Columbians need to feel just an unquestionable confidence in. And when you have news pieces like this, it's very devastating to public trust. So the BC NDP and the Premier have to eat crow on this, that this was not handled properly at all. And to Jillian's point, if we had better FOI information, we would actually know what the hell's going on, because right now we don't.
Mm-hmm. The other wrinkle, Jeff, I guess, is we're only a few months away from a municipal election. So there's all sorts of tomfoolery and skullduggery afoot. What do you think of this?
It's been a malfunction at the junction. Look, what happened to Surrey Police Chief Norm Lipinski is turning into quite the mystery. But if I had to guess what happened, it would go something like this. This is a completely made up scenario. I'm not saying that this actually happened. Don't sue me. So I think the province may have been tired of being dragged into Surrey's long-running police battle, which has been happening for years and years. I think they would have been heavily lobbied by Mayor Locke to give her more responsibility over policing. I think it's hard to see a scenario where she wasn't involved in the board appointments of the people who made this vote. And it was that board that fired the chief. And I think that Angelo's right, that the province has some responsibility. I think this mayor of Surrey has a lot of responsibility in this too. And I think if this situation, this tumult at the top keeps going, the province is going to end up having to step in again and clean up a political mess. And you talk about local elections. It's hard to see how any of this helps Brenda Locke ahead of her re-election bid in the next local election.
Mm-hmm. Chaos does not look good on the mayor, for sure. Okay, we're out of time. Thank you to the Pod Squad for being here. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the audio podcast every day for the latest in BC politics. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be back next week. Until then, take care. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn how Uber and Mad Canada are reducing impaired driving at uber.com/homesoon.